We're going to talk about the Seismic Gap Tour, and you're here.
A seismic gap is a place where the plates are moving, but they're not slipping. So essentially, the plates are collecting energy like this.
Halo sahabat tangguh, apa kabar? Perkenalkan, saya Hanif Sulaiman dari Universitas Indonesia yang akan memadu bincang-bincang dengan pembicara kita pada kali ini di dalam podcast BNPB. Pada edisi khusus yang akan membahas tentang sebuah tour. Tour apa ya kira-kira? Sebelum berkenalan dengan pembicara, saya punya pantun. Kuda bergerak di atas papan catur. Langkah teratur penuh strategi. Kita akan membahas Seismic Gap Tour. Hidup beriringan bersama geologi. So our guest is actually not an Indonesian, so I'm going to start this podcast in English. Today we have a very special guest coming all the way from Utah, United States of America, Dr. Ron Harris. He is a professor of geology from Brigham Young University. He is an expert in natural disaster risk assessment, especially in earthquakes and tsunamis in Indonesia. You have conducted more than 30 field expeditions in Indonesia and have a deep understanding of disaster dynamics in our country. But before we go straight to the questions, I'd like to take you on a little journey down the memory lane. Because the first time I met you was in 2013, if you remember. First time I met you, it was at UPN Jogja. You were presenting about your paleo tsunami research plan. You're going to Ambon and Banda Neira. Meanwhile, I was also at the time planning to go to Masohi for a totally different reason. Nothing related to geology. I was doing a project on preserving traditional Indonesian games. Our path couldn't have been more different, but yet fate had other plans. I feel like we were fated to meet at that time.
Definitely.
Yeah. And over lunch, I impulsively asked if I could tag along with you to go to Ambon after I'm done at Masohi. To my surprise, you say yes. But I suspect that you agreed partly because you needed an extra pair of hands for someone to do the heavy digging of the trenches to look for tsunami deposits. That trip to Ambon was a turning point. It sparked a journey that eventually led me to Brigham Young University in 2016 when I became your graduate students. So we've known each other for a long time. It was 12 years, 13 years, and counting. And I want more people to know you. So here we are at BNPB Podcast. Do you want to say hi to our listener first?
Yes. Selamat pagi.
Selamat pagi. Well, they might listen to this podcast not only in the morning.
Oh. Selamat sore, selamat malam.
Yeah, there you go. So, Dr. Harris, question number one. I think we can start with what made you interested in geology and in the context of disaster?
The first question is, I think I was born a geologist.
Wow.
Because all my earliest memories, I was asking questions about landforms and about rocks and about earthquakes and volcanoes. And most people couldn't answer the questions. I grew up in a place very similar to Java,
okay,
with a volcanic arc and a trench and so on in Oregon. And so back then, nobody really understood plate tectonics very well. And so I took a geology class in high school. And from the first day to the last, I was like, this is what I want to do.
Wow.
So I can learn how to listen to the earth.
So you found geology early.
I did. So when I got into college, I knew exactly which way to go.
Yeah. Well, in Indonesia, we don't have geology subject during like high school. Well, we had something similar, which is geography.
Not the same.
It's not the same. It's not the same. Well, yeah. And you're also very an outdoorsy kind of person. I think
Yeah.
you're one of the most active and outdoor people that I know in my life.
Okay.
You've done surfing, you've done snorkeling, diving, hiking, I don't know,
Sure.
and other things. And it matched with your interest with geology as well, because you could
Yeah.
explore and do things, a lot of things,
Yeah.
in places that you go. What about the disaster itself? Like, okay, that we know you're interested in geology, it can answer lots of questions about the landform. So why disaster studies?
Well, I was doing most of my geological research on the way mountains form. And most of the mountains around where we were had already formed. They were no longer forming. And I wanted to go to a place where mountains were actively rising out of the ocean. And there was earthquakes, and there were volcanoes and tsunamis and landslides. I wanted to see it in action, not afterwards. And so that's why I came to Indonesia initially to do my research for my PhD. And once I started working in Indonesia, the people ingratiated themselves to me. I developed a deep love for the Indonesian people. And I could see that they were suffering because of lack of knowledge about natural hazards. And that a little bit of knowledge could go a long ways in protecting people from these hazards. And so education is probably one of the most powerful ways in which you can change a situation from being very dangerous to being safe. And I thought, that's not difficult. We just need to go and tell people that they live in a dangerous area, and this is what they could expect to have happen, and this is how to get ready for it. And at that time, nobody was doing any of that kind of work in Indonesia that I could tell. So I was able to get a Fulbright fellowship. Like, you got a Fulbright to come to the US.
I did.
And I got a Fulbright to go to Indonesia. And lived here with my family and was able to work shoulder to shoulder with Indonesian disaster mitigators. And it changed my life, changed the direction of my career, because I needed to get help from all people, not just geologists. I needed social scientists. I needed political scientists. I needed lots of different integrated research to help us understand not only how to assess the hazard, but how to communicate the hazard and how to reduce the risk of the hazard. And that involves a lot of different people. So I wasn't just looking at rocks anymore. I was working with people.
Yeah.
And my knowledge of the rocks and of geophysics was helping me to help the people. So it was the perfect situation because I had a passion for geology. And I found a way to share that passion with others that allowed them to benefit. So benefiting people with the thing you're most passionate about is the best way to be happy.
Wow. Yeah. The first thing, I think the first door is geology, and then you met Indonesian people and how you think that you could share your knowledge and also what you know to the people. The collaboration is also very important. And remind me the first time you came to Indonesia with the Fulbright scholars. What year was it?
1998.
1998. That was a long time ago, and I bet you have met many people and you've been to many regions in Indonesia, many islands. What make you like always coming back? I think you usually always come back like every year during summertime in the States. What's the reason for you to always have a, I guess, the eagerness like to come back and to share your knowledge and educate?
I feel like it's my calling. I feel like my expertise in geoscience has positioned me so that I can make a big difference. And Indonesia is unique, very unique, because it's so densely populated with people, but also with hazards.
True.
And so there's no place on the planet that has an overlap of those quite like Indonesia does. There are other places like maybe Japan or other places that have the same amount of population density and same amount of hazards. But they also have a lot more resources available than Indonesia does to do something about it. And so this is where I feel like I've been called to work. And each year I make new friends, and I want to come back and see my friends like you.
Yeah. That's like meeting someone like, especially working in like a disaster related work, meeting someone that has the same frequency as you have the chemistry could, I mean, it's one of the source of energy for you to keep doing the work.
Yeah.
That's also what I felt working as a disaster risk reduction consultant. Sometimes like the work in disaster could be like, made you think, do I make any impact? Like, does it work? Does it help? How do you handle that kind of thoughts yourself?
Yeah, essentially we're asking people to pay up front, right? To be proactive so they can be prepared. And if you're prepared, you don't fear, right? So we're trying to reduce fear of natural hazards by providing a way for people to become prepared, especially with response efficacy. If they know how to respond, also know how to self evaluate the situation, and then what to do about it, and to respond immediately. So those are the things that I think are central to protecting the lives and the resources that Indonesia has. I lost my way during that question, but
that's
I'm
okay.
going to ask it again.
It's okay. It reminded me of your NGOs, which is In Harm's Way.
Yeah.
I think the first time I heard about that was maybe in 2013 when we were in Ambon.
Yeah.
And we took a photo with the coconut.
Oh yeah.
I think that was and you
The
introduced
Pramuka symbol.
the Pramuka symbol.
Yeah.
So that was also the first time I heard the phrase of In Harm's Way. And I like it. Can you tell us more about In Harm's Way and what are you working on in Harm's Way?
So because I started doing basic research in Indonesia on neotectonics, essentially the kinds of processes that cause natural hazards, I found that I could get funding to study a volcano or a fault zone or tsunamis, but not money to help other people avoid being in danger from those things. So funding agencies are kind of rigged to do what they call pure research, which doesn't involve people.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I had to make my own source of funding. I couldn't rely on government grants or oil company grants or anything like that, which I had in the past. And so I set up In Harm's Way as a portal to collect donations that can fund people like you and others in Indonesia who are using communication and implementation methods to save people's lives. So In Harm's Way doesn't have any overhead. There's no like salaries that go to anybody except for covering travel expenses and other types of expenses to get the word out.
That's the real definition of a nonprofit organization.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, since we're going to talk about the Seismic Gap Tour and you're here, this trip is you're going to be on a tour.
Yes.
You call it Seismic Gap Tour.
Right.
Could you tell us what kind of tour is it? Is it a music concert type of tour? Is it a what do you call like a trip, road trip tour? What is it?
Since you're on the tour as well, it could be a music tour.
I don't play music.
Or a poetry tour.
Poetry tour.
Yeah.
That sounds cool.
Or even a baseball tour. Yeah. So a seismic gap is a place where the plates are moving, but they're not slipping.
Mm.
So essentially, the plates are collecting energy like this. Mm-hmm. There's no slippage at all. And then eventually, all of that energy overcomes the friction and slips and creates a large earthquake and a tsunami. And so one of the seismic gaps we recognized back in the early 2000s was the seismic gap that goes from Banda Aceh all the way to Burma.
Okay.
And we actually published 2 papers about the dangers of that gap. Because there were just essentially little to no earthquakes happening, but you could still see that the plates were converging there because we can measure plate motion directly with GPS. And so that was a seismic gap. There's also a seismic gap off the shore of Java that extends all the way into Nusa Tenggara. By Sumba, by Timor. And there's also a seismic gap up near Seorang. There's 2 seismic gaps, one in the Maluku area and one in the Moluccas. So all of the cities that we're going to are places, the largest population centers in these seismic gaps. The purpose of the Seismic Gap Tour is to not only advise what has happened in the past and is likely to happen again, but also to communicate the risk to those in the city and to also listen to what they have already done. So we use questionnaire surveys to determine if people are aware, first of all, of the hazard. Awareness is the first step. Second step is gaining knowledge about what to expect. And you can do that by reading or researching historical accounts of events that have happened in the past. And then the third thing is to say, okay, what can we do in the next 5 years to reduce the risk in our city? That's the purpose of the Seismic Gap Tour.
So you mentioned that there are some seismic gap in Indonesia.
Some.
Did
5.
You say, well, 5 can be some, right?
Yeah.
So which gap are you going to? Like which cities are you going to give talk to?
There's 2 seismic gaps in the easternmost part of Indonesia. One near Manado along the northern Sulawesi Trench and one near Ternate along the Halmahera Trench. And then we're going to go to Padang because it's the only part of the western part of Indonesia that still has a seismic gap. Because the big seismic gap that went from Aceh to Burma already ruptured, producing a magnitude 9 event and killing 270,000 people.
Right. So you're going to Manado, Ternate, and Padang.
And then to Bandung. Because Bandung has a seismic gap too.
Right.
A fault that goes right through the city. Yeah, and then to Timor.
Yeah. In Bandung, it was Sesar Lembang.
The
Lembang fault. Lembang fault. Yeah.
And then to Timor, Timor Barat, where there's a large seismic gap in the Timor Trough.
I found that the presentation that you're going to give talk to in this series for the tour, I found the title is also interesting. You wrote down Bridges Over Troubled Waters, Experiments with Full Spectrum Geohazard Risk Reduction in Indonesia. Would you like to tell us the story behind this title?
Well, I love Simon and Garfunkel.
Simon and Garfunkel.
That's a phrase from one of their songs. But the bridges often span gaps. You have a river you have to go over, so you have a gap in the land. You have to bridge the gap, right?
Mhm.
Well, the problem right now with disaster mitigation is there's a big gap between what science understands and is able to demonstrate as a risk and what the people on the other side of the gap know and are ready for and feel confident about. We need to narrow that gap because the scientists are focusing on assessing the risk, but we need to take it beyond just assessment to communicating the risk and then implementing risk reduction strategies. That's the gap. And in order to bridge that gap, you have to have not just geoscientists, you have to have social scientists, and you have to have people who are leaders and communicators, political scientists, so that you can effectively get the message out. And you can get funding so you have resources to protect yourself.
Yeah, that's also the same spirit with BNPB. Have you ever heard of pentahelix? It's like the 5 helix of BNPB.
I thought there were 3.
Oh, it was the original
but now
logo.
there's 5.
Yeah, they have a 5.
I thought the 3 were assessment, communication, and implementation.
I think so.
That's what I always said they were.
So yeah, they are collaboration among like researchers and then business owners, universities, medias, and the scientists. Did I say it?
Yeah, you said scientists twice.
And then BNPB itself. Yeah.
It would be great if we had double scientists working on this.
Yeah, we need all the scientists on board on this to solve it. So what are you trying to say with full spectrum in this?
Exactly what you just said. That's a full spectrum, right? Whereas traditionally, most of the work was being done by geoscientists and almost all of the work was assessment only. And still the geoscience community is trapped in that mold, thinking that if they're assessing the risk, they're doing their job and someone else is going to communicate the risk and someone else is going to implement risk reduction strategies. But who's tasked with communicating the risk? Nobody is better able to communicate the content than the scientist. Scientists aren't trained in communication skills, right? And so they need to team with someone who's a communicator, but they need to make sure that the message is correct. So the scientist and the communicator have to work together. You can't just delegate the communication to someone else and expect it's going to be done. One of the best examples was the Banda Aceh disaster, where after the tsunami, there was a researcher who did a questionnaire survey of people. I think he questioned like 600 people.
Wow. 96%
of them did not know that there was a connection between an earthquake and a tsunami. 96%. The same thing was done in Japan after the 2011 tsunami in Japan. Same size tsunami, same amount of people exposed, but only 20,000 people died versus 200,000 people died. And they interviewed them, and almost 96% of them knew that when the ground shook, a tsunami could come. So just the opposite. And the difference is communication.
Very true. And I would agree that scientists are not trained to be a communicator in a sense that talking outside of the circle of scientists.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's also why we're teaming up with BNPB Studio Podcasts for these sessions. My next question will be the biggest challenge in disaster preparedness. I guess you have covered it in your previous answer, or would you like to add?
No, I think I'll reiterate the biggest challenge is to convince people to pay up front. Because usually the only thing that gets done is if there's immediacy to the issue, right? Like you see the tsunami coming and so people do stuff. But to see it coming in 5 years or to see it coming in 10 years and doing something about it now is very difficult. to be proactive, because you have to pay to do preparation work, and you don't know if that's going to pay off. But we try to convince people, eventually it will pay off. So you're not just paying for you, you're paying up front for the future generations, which is your responsibility. If you know that there's something that you can do to help people, not just now, but in the future, I think it's a calling we all have.
Yeah. If you know, you share.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I remember when you presented in UPN Jogja, at the end of the talk, you asked each of the students coming to the presentation where they're from.
Yeah.
And my friends were like answering they're from Medan, from Nias, from Timor, all those cool places. And when it comes to me, I don't think my hometown is that interesting. When I mentioned Cirebon and you said, "Oh, Cirebon, banyak gempa." So that's also it reminded me back of when you say about experience, when people experience disaster, or like when people experience an earthquake or a tsunami, it became a part of them.
Yeah.
And it moved them to do things.
Yeah.
And for those who hasn't experienced it, it is a bit harder for them to understand the risks. Yeah. And I think that's also what's important from your Seismic Gap Tour. It's also about communicating the risks and understanding it and what to do. Because you also mentioned there will be like some kind of a discussion on what would they do in 5 years from now.
What's the plan?
Yeah, what's the plan?
There needs to be a plan. And so what we want to do is document what Manado has done already and what they want to do, what Ternate's done already and what they want to do, and so on, all the way around. Not to condemn or to judge, but to celebrate. To celebrate that some people get it and some people are doing something about it. And if we do that, then it'll encourage more to become involved.
That was great. I think we came down to the last question. What is the main message that you want to convey to our Indonesian listener regarding disaster risks?
Disaster risk reduction is everybody's responsibility. Not geoscience, just geoscience, not BNPB, it's everybody's obligation, because we all live on this planet and we all should understand what risk, because the only reason we live on this planet is, like I said to you before, by geologic consent. Yeah. If we put ourselves in harm's way because of lack of knowledge, then when something happens, we blame it on other people, but it was our own decision to live in harm's way. Whereas if you know you're in harm's way, then you can move or you can protect yourself. Yeah. So it's everybody's, it's the governor's problem. It's the senator's problem. It's the school teacher's issue. It's the hospitals. It's the businesses that are putting themselves at risk by being in certain areas that are going to have hazardous events. And so if we all take responsibility and do one thing that we can do, everybody has one thing that they can do. And they need to ask themselves, what one thing, no matter how small, no matter how small, what one thing can I do to make this place that I live more safe? That's my message.
That was awesome message. Because like when you tell people to do just one thing, it doesn't feel like it's a heavy thing to do.
Right.
It's not like a big load to do.
And it's individual. It's an individual thing. Doesn't have to be big or small. I mean, it's an individual thing that pulls from the person's humanity
Great. I hope we will have a great tour, Seismic Gap Tour. Well, I would like to thank you, Dr. Harris, for your time, stories, and insight. You came all the way from Utah and always find a reason to come back to Indonesia and do research and communicating risks and help people to understand the risks and narrowing the gap, which is what you're always trying to do. Sahabat Tangguh, jangan lupa untuk update info penanggulangan bencana di Indonesia melalui medsos BNPB. Karena update bencana, jangan tunggu jadi korbannya. Sampai jumpa.
Sampai jumpa.
Sampai jumpa.